Lock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now, it's time to roll back and start the first case.
Welcome to a special release episode of the First Case podcast. You're not used to hearing my voice anymore. It's been a little while since we launched the podcast. I'm Justin Poulin. I'm the CEO at Healthcare HQ Media and was one of the launch hosts of the First Case podcast with Melanie Perry and Paul Wafer. And we had another host for a little while, Jeremy Gibson Roark, and then eventually Chris Blevins joined the team and hosted First Case, as you have all come to know and love it over the last several years with Melanie. And so, I got to say, it's a big thank you episode, Melanie. You've got a new job. And so we wanted to kind of let everybody know that. And in the interim, while we continue to look for a podcast host to fill your shoes, which will be impossible, but we will continue to search. We're also going to have Garrett Hollembeak from the Transmission Control podcast filling in for the next season. So I have the both of you here so we can kind of talk about that and let everybody know what to expect. But mostly, Melanie, I just want to say it's been a pleasure getting to know you over the last, 5+ years. I'm trying to think back like when we actually started recording podcasts before we launched, but I think it was 2019. It was before the pandemic.
Was it 2019 or was it 2020?
Might have been 2020.
It was 2020. It was 2020.
Yes, that's right.
I can tell you why it was 2020 because I had bilateral gastroc recessions done in 2020. And one of the first episodes that we recorded, or one of the first episodes that we planned, I was sitting in a recliner with both of my legs propped up in their little boots as I tried to recover from having anything bilateral done on your body is really a commitment, but I needed to get it done and needed to get it over with. So I remember sitting in the recliner in my living room, computer on my lap, legs in the air in these gigantic gray boots, planning through a couple of episode interviews and outlines and stuff. So yeah, because then we launched in 2021 in January. So that was a hot minute ago. That's
right. So yeah, it was 5+ years. It's just my math, or maybe I think it's still 2025. My math is bad on that. But what better way to spend your time after bilateral surgery than to do a podcast? You didn't have to get up and move around. And
no, I can run my mouth anywhere. It doesn't matter. Yeah, for sure.
I do want to give a special shout out to Paul. We had an episode for him when he retired and stepped away from the podcast, but he was really instrumental in getting this launched with the two of us, Melanie. But I thought I'll give a shout out to him and Jeremy, but maybe you could talk a little bit about, Chris coming on to host the podcast with you and, Lindsay Joyce, who have contributed immensely to the First Case podcast over the years, as have many others who have been regular guests or promoters and just, people that have just helped us along the way. I thought maybe, we're really grateful for you, but I know you're also a grateful person. I thought you might want to say some thanks to the people that helped us over the years.
I mean, there's a really, really long list of people for sure that we've pulled in or pulled from or had a resource or been just a valuable contributor or supporter. I remember my first AORN Expo that I went to after we had launched the First Case podcast, and I'd actually never been to AORN Expo before either. And here I am, it's the first expo after COVID. I'm wandering around through the expo hall. I've got my First Case t-shirt on, whatever. And walking through, and then all of a sudden I hear somebody screaming my name, like, Melanie! And I'm like, who the heck here knows me? My gosh, what the heck? And I turn around and there's this girl sitting on a bench in the middle of the hallway. She's like, oh my gosh, I listened to your podcast. And I'm like, we just launched. Jeez. Okay, cool. Anyway, but her name was Stella. And Stella has been a huge fan from from the very beginning, but also a great resource throughout the time. Hey, you should talk about this. Hey, have you heard about this? Oh, y'all should totally talk about this. She's been a great wealth of ideas of different podcast topics and things to talk about. And she's just one example of many. Like multiple times I'd go to conferences or go to events or run into people and they're like, oh my gosh, I love the podcast. I love the things you talk about, that I can use those podcasts with my Periop 101 students. I can use those as extra ways to learn. One way that I ended up getting connected with Lindsay was because of social media. She reached out and she's like, hey, I did this cool thing with my master's program and turned it into a perioperative nursing elective and whatnot. If you want to talk about it, that would be really cool. And I'm like, well, yeah, I want to talk about it. And, so then that brought her on as a guest, but then it also connected us with her. And she ended up writing for us for a blog. She would also provide me with some really cool topics, but she ended up using the podcast episodes because they were so educational with her nursing electives for the college classes that she taught. And then I would have perioperative educators come up to me and be like, yeah, we use your podcast all the time with our cohorts because there's so much. It's a great way to learn a different platform. It's not like you're sitting in a classroom being talked to. You can learn, at your own, whenever you feel like learning about something. So they use a lot of the topics, and that was really cool. And then Chris Blevins came along, and for the longest time, I was like, we cannot have a perioperative podcast that does not include the voice of the scrub tech. Like, come on. We are more to the OR than just the nurses. And so getting to know Chris and just being like, girl, you got to come on the podcast. And she was already hosting a podcast too, because she was hosting the Scrub Life podcast. And then it's all fuzzy. I don't remember exactly how all that worked out, but ultimately we roped her in and she started helping me host. And it was just a good blend of my side of it from nursing plus her side of it from the scrub tech. And we do see things very, very differently. And you can sometimes pick up on that just in some of the interviews where I was like, oh, she said that. Oh yeah. Well, I guess a scrub would see it that way, versus how maybe I would see something. So it was really good to have both of those. And then actually coming full circle now to Garrett, because infection prevention is a really big thing in the operating room, and that's not my wheelhouse at all, other than feeling like I'm being watched every time they show up to audit us and I'm going to do something wrong.
Don't worry, we're as lost as anybody in the OR.
But having that connection to Garrett, I've pulled on him more than once to come be a guest to talk about something related to how the OR and infection prevention connected. And so to be able to have him as a resource as well, there's just so many people that we got to know, connected with, and then they became just a part of the show over the years, for sure.
You were a real leader in pulling people from the other podcasts and doing themed seasons. You did it with supply chain. You had Gary on.
I love Gary. Yes, I had Gary more than once. He was great.
Gary Skinner from the Power Supply podcast, which is the one that I used to host all of the podcasts in the family. And then I kind of kept the supply chain podcast despite being a nurse. I kind of stuck with supply chain. And then everybody, who was co-hosting on the various brands took the leader role like you did, Melanie, and really did a phenomenal job with it. And you segued great to Garrett. And I'd say you've been on the First Case podcast before, Garrett. So there's going to be people who are familiar with you, but maybe you can just talk about, kind of your role. You're a new hire on the full-time kind of basis with Healthcare HQ Media. So maybe you could just talk about that and what your background is and maybe your plans for this special season coming up of the First Case podcast while we look for a new host.
Yeah, thank you. And it is pretty exciting. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges is coming anywhere close to Melanie's excitement and clinical experience when we do a recording. And Melanie, you may not know this, but when I was doing my first couple podcasts with transmission control as a host, I listened to the First Case ones because I'm like, that's what we want to get as close as we can to, is that blend of storytelling and clinical expertise. And it's a very unique mix so to the audience, don't expect that in the next season because Melanie is 1 in a million. But
you give yourself more credit, though. Everybody's got crazy stories that make them get all spun up. And
that's the fun thing about the OR. Yeah. We're very excited. This next season, we're going to be blending transmission control and First Case. And the voices of those two distinct brands to talk about surgical site infection reduction across the perioperative loop. So we'll have guests coming on to talk about point of use treatment and aseptic technique. And then also all of the kind of challenges with NHSN and surveillance and getting that information to the frontline staff. So It'll be pretty exciting, and we're pulling deep from Melanie's guest picks. So we will have Jeremy on this next season, and we'll be pinging Chris and Lindsay along the way too to keep that voice. So we're very excited for this special season.
That'll be good. That'll be a really good season to blend them together for sure. We just finished the season following our instruments, going all the way through the OR, all the way through sterile processing back. And of course, we hit on point abuse treatment. So if you need extra people to talk to on that topic, I got to know all sorts of people that we can talk about that. But it's good. It's good to have those conversations. That'll be a good season.
Yeah. And it's unique to see the brands line up. So,
yeah.
My career in healthcare started as a tech in sterile processing. Then I moved to the dark side of IP and was standing in the corner, trying not to touch anything blue in the OR and not contaminating any sterile fields. But that's on the infection prevention side. One of the things that we've noticed already in some of the conversations is IP is seeing this little slice of what, we expect to happen from a compliance standpoint. But the OR staff, the surgical technologists and the circulators, they have 9 million other things running through their head about, taking care of the patient, taking care of their staff members. So I'm excited to open up that slice that IP sees into the whole OR setting.
So Melanie, I want to talk a little bit more about how you got here too. Like, I really do want to celebrate your contribution. And so Garrett, you did a nice job of kind of talking about one skill set that Melanie has, which is the ability to tell stories. Melanie, you get very passionate and excited when somebody hits on an important point. Nobody emphasizes something that you really want the audience to remember better than you. You have a special knack for that, and then you contextualize it. So you don't just emphasize it, but you add another scenario to help people integrate it or visualize it instead of just like, oh yeah, and maybe they didn't quite get it and they move on. Instead, you really help make sure that the listeners know exactly what we're discussing. And that is a very unique skill set. And I will say too, you had a very unique skill set when we found you, because part of the reason we reached out to you is that you were cultivating the circulating life. And so, there are not a lot of people out there that have clinical expertise and expertise in social media. And that's what we were trying to build. And you were the perfect blend of both. And I just thought, I'm sure we talked about it in the early episodes, but it would be really cool for you to tell the circulating life story for people who are listening in, because I think it's inspirational. We have an opportunity in today's world to communicate and to do creative or I should say, live our creative dreams out in a way that we really could not have done so 30 years ago. But there's so many tools that can enable us to be creative. And especially if we're willing to give some of our free time towards an effort like that we would find fulfilling. But you were doing it before, there were AI platforms to help us along. So I'd love for you to tell that story.
Oh gosh. Okay. So let's try to make this not the rest of the podcast and take it in a concise nutshell. And if you know me very well, I don't do concise. I'm very wordy. It can be a problem. But I started in the OR in 2011. I'd been a nurse for 9 years. I'd worked in all sorts of various specialties, and I came into the OR. The OR is hard. It is really hard. It is hard to learn all of the things that we have to do. And you come in, if you come in as a new grad, it's incredibly overwhelming. You come in as somebody with experience, it's also incredibly overwhelming. Oh, and you feel stupid. I have all this experience. It does me no good. Okay. So I'm trying to navigate the operating room, trying to navigate this world that it is. And I got a lot of answers that were, well, this is just the way we've always done it, or this is just what you're supposed to do. And nobody could really tell me why. And I couldn't get a lot of clarity and consistency on some of the things I was confused about, or some of the things I wanted to know more, especially prepping and just positioning and a lot of stuff like that. And so I would go home and try to look up online and see if people were talking about it, or if somebody was talking about it. And this is back in 2011. Nobody was talking about Jack. Okay. I was expecting the internet to be a whole lot more helpful than it was in this regard. And that idea kind of stayed with me, rolled around in the back of my head for a while. And finally in 2000, maybe around that time, I was, you know what, if nobody else is doing this, then I think I've been doing this long enough. I can do it, and I can put that information out there, and I can create something that that'll help other people, because I know what it's like to be new in the operating room. I know what it feels like. I've never forgotten it. And if I can make it better for somebody else, and if I can make it a little bit easier, or if I can just help somebody understand it better, then I can make it better for them, and ultimately make it better for our patients, because we have people who are confident in what they're doing. So wedge into all of that. Okay. These glorious ideas. I don't think I've ever told you this part, but I was,
here we go.
Well, I was sitting in the bathroom actually at a restaurant, and I had been thinking about these ideas, like, what would I call it if I started a blog or a website or whatever? What would I call it? I don't know. And I've been talking to all these ideas with my brother, and we'd gone to a restaurant, and I just, I don't know. I guess it had been sitting in the back of my brain. I've just got to go pee. So I run into the bathroom, and as I'm going to the bathroom, all of a sudden it hits me. I could call it the circulating life. And I'm like, okay, because, the bathroom is the best place for inspiration ever. So why not? Anyway, so I'm texting my brother when I got back to the table. I'm like, oh, we could call it this, and this would be great. And he's like, oh, yeah, that'd be a really good idea. And so, sorry, side note. And then wedged into all of that at that same time, we had incredibly horrific workplace violence event at work. Had two employees in our facility got shot. One ended up passing away in OR 10 in our department. It was terrible. And the other one critically injured, but did survive and has moved on. And it's great to see him periodically and know that he's doing well after such an incredibly traumatizing event. And with all of the trauma and the PTSD and just the heaviness and sadness and all of that experience, I needed an outlet to just focus on something different and not just think about the heaviness that was work. And I wouldn't say that it drove me necessarily to go ahead and hit launch and start it, but it was in that moment that my brother actually was like, hey, let's do it. He was my investor, or whatever you want to call it. And he paid the money to kick the blog off to start that. But at that time, to be able to just focus on writing, and I do love to write, and I will, I talk a lot. Well, I can write a lot too. My brain tends towards stupid rhymes and dumb parodies of songs and things that are humorous for sure. But if you pay attention, they're actually teaching you something or telling you something about what we're doing. It's just in a much more off the wall, bizarre format than maybe you're used to out of a journal or something much more professional. Because I don't do professional very well sometimes, but I had the opportunity to focus and change shift my focus from the sadness and the trauma and the whatever to something that I really had a heart for and a genuine desire to do, which was to put this information out there, to help people, to give them a resource to find, right? And so when you're reading all this stuff about how to start a blog and all this mess, like, oh, you should have a Facebook page too, or you should have social media. And, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for all that. So what I did was I started a Circulating Life Facebook page, and any graphics that I made for the blog, I threw up on the Facebook page. I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. Well, then suddenly Facebook page took off, and I was still writing for the blog, but then suddenly I had this page that was growing. I'm like, well, now I have to babysit this. What do I do with this? And obviously blog format and blog platform is very different than social media platform. Oh, and then every social media platform is also very different, and you have to do each of them differently. So all that to say, I started really pouring a lot of focus into the Facebook page, into growing that community. And that's really what it became, is a community of people who have the same experience. We might work in ORs from here to New Zealand and back, but we've all had difficult surgeons. We've all had annoying bosses. A lot of us have been in cases where instruments have flown across the room because somebody's mad, or we've had cases get added on at midnight, and we're going in doing something elective that we don't think we need to be doing. We've had these experiences, and we're not alone in those experiences. And to realize you're not alone, we don't always like what we experience, but there's other people here who've experienced it too, and people who've been there, done that, and they can share some advice. Hey, here's an opinion. And then I have this huge group of people who can be like, oh, hey, you're new. Here's what you need to know. Make sure you remember this. Don't ever forget this. And I can get them to just chime in and give advice I don't know, all day long if I wanted to, but they will, and they will give that advice. And 95% of them are great, awesome, wonderful people who are super caring and just want to be helpful. You're going to run into trolls wherever you go, but for the most part, it is a wonderful group. And they just collectively, I think we make it a place where if you're new, if you're unsure, if you're uncertain, you've got a place where you can ask a question and somebody's going to answer it for you, which is what I like. That's a long story, but that's a nutshell.
Well, it's kind of an important story, and it's about your life, not just what you've done on your free time and then professionally as well. But you took an event that was very destructive, and you took the energy from that and you did something very constructive and beautiful with it. And Garrett, I have to let you in on something. Speaking of beautiful, Melanie's voice is an amazing singer. And around the holidays, some of those parodies, or the songwriting, she'll do that, but she can back it up. I'm just telling you. Yeah. So I can't remember if did we ever like put it out on the podcast feed or anything, or did we share it internally?
I don't think so.
On social media?
I think I just shared them like on my LinkedIn page and Facebook page and whatnot. But a really cool story. If any of you all listening are old enough to remember the Animaniacs, okay, and when it's Yakko or Wacko, I forget which one, who sings the songs about the countries, United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Haiti, Jamaica, Peru, that one. Anyway, I took that one time and I redid it into all about the operating room, a surgeon, a scrub tech, a CRNA, a circulating nurse tube, pre-op and PACU, pharmacy lab, and radiology too. Anyway, went through the whole thing, posted that one on all of my platforms, including TikTok, and somebody tagged the guy who did the voice of Yakko or Wacko, maybe both. I don't know. And he actually commented on it and he was like, "Oh, that's really good. You did a good job." So I'm like, "Oh, how fun." So that was just awesome. Stupid, but it was like, "Oh, hey, cool. They heard my song."
That is incredible.
Yeah.
And that's such a cool thing, because one of the, I think, hiccups people are like, the roadblocks they get is, "Oh, I'm not a social media person. Oh, I don't have anything new to say. Anything I've said is already saturated out there." And one thing we always want people to is, you have a story, you have a perspective and a life experience. We have a platform. Come and talk to us. Come and tell us about it. Come and tell us about your day, because somebody else out there is having the same day or worse and can benefit from what you know. So I'm so glad that you shared that.
Yeah. And the way that you see it, the way that you experienced it, just because you feel like we've talked about it 1,000 times, say the example is getting yelled at because you had to wait 3 minutes for the prep to dry, or whatever. And we've all lived that one. Come on. But you feel like it's a common conversation, but have we actually talked about it? Have we talked about how it felt and how you handled it? Oh, and by the way, let's talk about why we actually do what we do and why we're supposed to be doing it, and put it all together to empower you, that the next time you're getting yelled at, where you're like, "Well, keep yelling because we're going to keep waiting. Sorry." But those conversations are what's so important. You're right. And then people will get, it may be, I deal with it, imposter syndrome, right? What makes me the person to talk about all this? I don't know, because I run my mouth and I'm willing to, I guess. But, but we can, but we talk ourselves out of it or overthink it or whatever. And there is everybody has something that they can add of value that every one of us can learn from, for sure.
And that's a question that I had for you. So 5 years on the podcast, did you ever hear a boring story or one that wasn't helpful to hear?
No, never. Oh my gosh. I learned so much stuff. I was actually just talking about one of our episodes on the podcast from 3 years ago, 30, something like that. We interviewed a person whose name I still can't remember because I need to go back and search through the podcast to see who it was. But it was like a disaster podcast season that we did. And we talked about like nursing in the field. Like if you're out hiking and something happens and you have to care for someone. So, obviously we went outside of the OR in that season, and that was so much fun. And to see the ways that nurses are just making patient care and healthcare better in their fields, because I think we do get enclosed in our own little specialty, right? My little world is the OR, and this is all I know. And so this is all we can talk about. Well, dude, what's everybody else doing? Because what they're doing is cool too. And I want to know about it. And so having the platform, having the microphone even being like, oh, I want to talk to you. And I mean, to some degree, and I will tell you this too, maybe it'll help you as you are
Dr.
hosting.
Glenn Barnes, by the way.
Yes,
Dr. Glenn Barnes.
I'm giving the shout. I knew it started with a G, and I could not remember his name. But yeah, Glenn Barnes, phenomenal. But when I would get into my head and start thinking, well, maybe nobody else wants to hear this. Maybe they don't want to know. Well, I think it's cool. So I assume somebody else does too. And so that was about the limit to how I limited myself. I think it's neat and I want to learn it. So surely one other person out there wants to learn this too. And that was, I mean, it's not the best litmus test, but it worked. And it really opened up so many more possibilities than just the walls of our OR. Sure, there's a lot to learn in the OR, but there's a lot to learn out there in healthcare as well that we find fascinating. And then we can learn something new. So anyway, definitely don't limit yourself to just OR and infection prevention, because there are thousands of topics out there that everybody finds interesting and wants to learn about.
I want to pull back the curtain a little bit.
Okay.
And no, nothing. Don't worry.
I mean, I've already talked about getting ideas in the bathroom, so I don't know what else we can talk about. So
different pathway on that. I'm thinking more about, there are people out there that have never recorded a podcast. And so there are lots of things that, happen in the course of, setting up an interview and actually conducting the interview that people don't hear about. And I just, before you go, I want to ask you this one, because one podcaster to another and another. How often does this happen? We do the podcast interview. It's a great interview. And then as soon as we stop recording, we ask a question that maybe we didn't think was really on topic or not. And then the guest gives you the golden nuggets. And you're like, why didn't we record that?
Yes.
Like,
it
is
happens
that
a
not
lot.
a common occurrence? Yeah.
Or you're logged in and you're checking sound and you're just chit-chatting. And I'll be like, before we start, I'm like, okay, here's what's going to happen. We're just going to jump right in. I'm going to ask you this. And then they just start talking and it's great stuff. I'm like, wait, I haven't hit record yet. Just hold that thought. We will come back to it. But yeah, no, I've gotten some fantastic stuff after I hit stop. And I'm like, well, that's just lost forever because we weren't still recording. So yes, it does happen frequently, but I don't know, maybe just leave the recording button open until you're finally just completely done. I don't know, but it does happen. And I'm like, oh, that was good, but oh well, that's for sure.
That's going to be the next podcast introduction to the ecosystem is what do you say when the recording button stops? Because it is great and some of the best insights. And also, you guys have probably seen this too. You hit stop on record and people take a breath and then they're like, man, I was so nervous about that. And I was going to talk about this. And we got to capture that somehow because these are real conversations with real clinicians and you can't beat that real world experience.
Oh, but that recording button blinking in the top corner can really make people terrified and overthink and nervous. And I mean, I tried to make sure that our guests, because I mean, none of these podcasts are recorded live. We don't have, there is no life and death going on in the middle of our conversations. We are just chatting. And you can edit it later. So like we can fix it, but what we can't fix is all of your energy. Like that's what we want. And we reached out to you because you have that passion. You have that energy. People can learn from you. You have a story to tell and we want to tell it. But then that light starts blinking. And I think people just, they just freeze up and then you stop recording and then suddenly they, like you said, they take a deep breath and they relax. Then it's like, oh, this
and
is
they think
now.
It's horrible. Like how many times do people say, we're going to probably have to do that again.
Yeah.
Like I'm so they're like apologizing. Yeah. And then we're like, everybody thinks that at the end. And then they get the initial edit and they're like, maybe one or two things I'd change. or nothing, but that wasn't so bad, and it's really other than the common, I hate the sound of my own voice, which, is a common complaint and common theme. I guess the reason I even brought that up was I know there are people that have been listening to this point that have thought, oh, I wish I could go on the podcast, but they have that same imposter syndrome,
right?
Melanie, that we, if you're going to host a podcast, you fight through that. But as a guest, you haven't really decided to make a commitment to doing content, or as somebody who might have some interest, but you're immediately like, but what if what I have to say is stupid? That stuff prevents a lot of people from contributing. And I think it's a it's always a good opportunity to flip the script on that and say, you absolutely, first off, you're going to be with a group of people who are going to be talking. So people got your back and we can pause and have sidebar conversations and help somebody through that. But even more so, it's about sharing passion and perspective. And that's what's most important. And I always like to try to encourage people, say, reach out. If you want to be a guest, express your interest, especially if you have a success story or you think that you've done something kind of creative or been through something that, you know, a small amount of the population might have experienced, because you could reach people who need to hear your story because they don't know anybody else who's been through the same thing. You know, we don't want people that are going to come on and necessarily parrot what everybody knows. We want people to
let's
come
hear the
on
new things.
Let's
hear the cool stories.
Stuff.
Yeah. And not like I'm going to sit here and pat all three of us on the back here as we all sit here as podcast hosts.
You could.
But a good podcast host is not going to let you look stupid like right. that. And trying to assure people, like, I got you. We can do this. Even if you're nervous, even if you're feeling a little uncomfortable, leaning into your expertise and leaning into your story and, you know, being able to have that conversation back and forth. I'm like, we can have this conversation. We can do it. And then generally I mess up enough when we're recording, then I have to stop and restart, that they're like, oh, well, if she's going to screw up that much, I think I can do anything. And so we'd be fine by the end of it, I think, just because I can't usually spit a sentence out together without trying to repeat it and make sure the producers, Aaron's our producer. I know that y'all don't always see him. He's behind the scenes, but he is phenomenal because he has edited so much of my stuff over the past 5 years. But, you know, they make it sound great. So I'm like, here we go. You can do it.
They really do. And that's another kind of behind the curtain thing is I always want people to know how much they shape the conversation.
Yeah.
Whether it's on a social media channel or on a podcast, we really respond to what the industry conversation is. And there's things that you're seeing in your facility that nobody else is seeing now, but they're going to see in 5 years. And that was something I wanted to pick your brain too, Melanie, as where do you see OR? Where do you see the perioperative loop progressing in the next 5 years? You know, you've got a great breadth of experience and exposure to the industry. Where is this going?
One thing, as you talk about this in the future and just having my flabbers gasted as I'm talking to people about what's going on.
I love that.
I was in a case, it was in the OR yesterday and we were putting our patient to sleep. Okay. I'm in the OR yesterday. We were putting our patient to sleep. And at this facility now with all of our laryngoscopes, every time we're putting patients to sleep, they have these really cool cameras that are going on them. So it's like taking the place of your glide scope when we were pulling in the glide scope and having all of the cameras. Now we've got them all right there on the on the laryngoscope. So they can visualize the airway, makes putting patients to sleep so much simpler. Anyway, the CRNA got to talking about now the AI that they have that can help track an airway, that they can go in, they can actually analyze and see all of this stuff, all with AI. And you think about all of the things that they are incorporating AI into and all of between that and then all of the different ways that we are moving to minimally invasive surgery and just robotics in so many different specialties. And, you think, okay, I'm going to reveal my very nerdy self. Okay. But I grew up watching Star Trek with my dad. Right. And so they put
I watched it with my mom.
The person slides in under the little rectangle thing and it just kind of looks and sees what's wrong and then fixes it. And then they go off, or they have their little scanner that diagnoses stuff. Right. But sometimes some of this stuff really feels very Star Trek-y, when it comes to futuristicness of it. But what AI is being incorporated into so much of our different stuff. And yes, we can flip the script on that and argue with AI and replacing people and the mistakes it can make. And that's not really the AI I'm going toward. I'm really going towards the AI that is augmenting our equipment, that is really helping us see things that we can't see or whatever. And then where robotics is going, where minimally invasive surgery is going. And then also the one that really, something that's really interesting to me and one that I might have talked about more often than maybe other things, just because it's something that it's one of those I want more people to know about, is when we look at ERAS, which is enhanced recovery after surgery, those ERAS protocols, all of the things and research that is being done to optimize our patients for surgery, to optimize them before they ever have surgery, so that they come in, they don't experience this just onslaught to their body that they don't have the nutrition for, they don't have the preparation for, but they're prepared. Their body has access to carbohydrates, access to fluid, all of the things that it needs so that they improve their recovery. And then the pain management side of that. So when it comes to where is the OR going, because I just really rambled about all sorts of cool things that I think right now, but I just learned that new one yesterday about AI and airways and stuff. Looking at the research with ERAS protocols and how we're expanding that to all of our patients. Looking at AI, robotics. I mean, it's going to be an exciting, I think, few years ahead as we see where those things go and how we improve it, how we reduce hospital stays after surgery, how we optimize our patients, improve care. It's going to be good.
I think you're exactly right. And we're just on the cutting edge of it. It's going to be a wild future that we're in for.
Well, Melanie, we're pretty much wrapping up. I hate saying goodbye. It's the worst.
I know.
I was thinking maybe you could just give us some final thoughts or words of wisdom to the new podcast host once we get them onboarded, or really however you want to use this time. But I also want you to take us out. I want you to, do the closing lines for this special release of the First Case podcast as well. And just know you're always welcome to come back on the show as a guest.
Okay.
If you also want to tell people where you're going, no problems with that either. Maybe people are curious what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe I should tell them.
So however you want to wrap this up, this podcast is yours, not just now, but forever.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's actually probably the best advice I would give to whoever is going to host it is don't look at it as, well, it's their podcast and I'm just here talking through the microphone. It was mine. I owned it. I claimed it. And I owned every bit of it. And because of that, I did what I wanted. Okay. But that also didn't limit me either. And so, yes, as a professional, as a clinician, I have my structure, right, for what we want to talk about, because I was never going to interview somebody about how to bake chocolate chip cookies unless it actually somehow we could stretch that back into the OR. I did interview somebody about how to do deep breathing and yoga once, but I swear it connected. Okay. Anyway, but that being said, make whoever the person hosting it is. And when we talk about anything that we're passionate about, own it, make it yours, right? Just throw 100%, 110% of your energy into it, because that's going to translate across the mic. Whoever the host is, that passion and that energy. Yes, we want passionate guests, but we got to have a host who is just right there with them, excited to learn and eager to learn. And I learned more hosting this podcast over the last 5 years than I swear I could have learned otherwise. But literally the world was my oyster. I got to talk about whatever I wanted to talk about to whoever I could reach out to and find, or people could connect me with. And man, it was just an incredible time of education and learning for me. And I figured if I'm learning something, then somebody else out there is learning something too. And so together we're going to learn about something. And there were some times I asked some really stupid questions because I didn't know, but I learned, and that's the goal, right? We can't know everything, but together we can work towards improving our knowledge, our practice, our education. So in that regard, now I am back at square one. I am the new person. I have moved to a vendor company. I am on the industry side of things, which is very different. But I work for a company called ColoWrap, and ColoWrap is a abdominal compression device for colonoscopies so that you can help prevent applying a manual abdominal pressure to patients, because that's a huge safety risk for both patients and staff when they are applying that pressure. And I could talk all day about the benefits of it, because I actually met the ColoWrap people here on this podcast, and we interviewed them about their product. And it was just really cool to learn about, because endoscopy was not something I was incredibly familiar with, even though endoscopy is also within the realm of surgical services. It's just people just kind of see it as the dark side.
I remember doing the vendor spotlight with you. It was really cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. So I learned about it through here, connected to him, actually ended up getting injured in an endoscopy, applying manual abdominal pressure, which then limited my ability to do a lot of clinical care. So that being said, I've moved on to educate now, still educating, just without necessarily the podcast mic, but the risks of applying abdominal pressure and colonoscopies and how we can fix that. And here's a solution that does a good job. So that's what I'm doing now. But the OR is at the root of what I do. And it's something that I can't completely walk away from. So I am still PRN in the operating room just because I feel like I need it right now. I might not always, but that's where I am at the moment. PRN in the OR and then full time with ColoRap, being an educator in that endoscopy world. So that is where I am and where I'm headed. But yes, I know Jill Holdsworth. Doesn't she help you host sometimes, Garrett? Is Jill on this podcast?
Yeah, she's been our co-host on Transmission Control for the last 3 or 4 seasons now.
Yeah. I interviewed her a few times too on the First Case podcast. But I ran into her at the SGNA conference just last weekend. Yeah. And I ran into her and I'm like, dude, I'll be a guest. You just let me know. We'll come chat. I'm happy to talk to you. So I'm sure that I will still be around. I'm always happy to chat and talk and, help educate others on our experiences for sure. But is there anything else you want me to say other than?
No, just going to miss you. I enjoyed our friendship too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we don't have to stop being friends.
No. But,
Yeah,
I agree. I'm just saying, it's kind of one of those things. Like, it helps pull you together, So 100%, we're going to have to make a more concerted effort, to stay in touch and check in on each other. And, but what's cool about a small business like this is that you do kind of, have a little bit of a blended family in a way versus, just a professional relationship. Yeah. And so I've really enjoyed getting to know you over the years that we've had the opportunity to work together. And so I just sincerely, on behalf of, me and the rest of the team, we're going to miss you, but we're happy for you and excited for you and incredibly grateful for what you did to make First Case, important to everybody who listens to these episodes, whether it's every week or one here and there. You made a difference in what you did with the podcast because of all the things that you just gave as advice to a future host. Like, it says everything about where your heart was, and that's why it was a success.
Well, thank you. I actually just have to say thank you for taking a chance on somebody who'd never even listened to a podcast when y'all reached out to me to host one. I'm like, yeah, sure, I can host one, whatever. Never even listened to one. But so those first few episodes were probably a little rocky, but we made it through, but
I thought they were pretty good. I did.
You compare the first ones to the later ones. We definitely grew. I would say, we got better. But anyway, thank you to you and Hank for letting me just run wild with it and letting me have creative freedom to just make it what I thought it needed to be. And to the audience, thank you for hanging out with me, for learning literally right alongside me. I am serious when I say I ask more than my fair share of stupid questions, but somebody's got to ask them because somebody's thinking them besides me. And so I'm just going to ask them and we're going to learn together. And so we did. And I would not trade the time that I spent in those hundreds of podcast interviews for anything, because it made me the practitioner and the clinician that I am today, with all of the things that I've learned, all of the people that I have connected with, the network that I've built, and the people that I know. It's just priceless, literally. And obviously to Lindsay Joyce, Chris Blevins, Stella, so many other nurses and techs who have been a part of this brand from very early on. Thank you for giving your time, your energy, your expertise, your efforts to help us make this the brand that it is. And then Garrett, I'm excited for you. I don't know how long you'll fill in until they find their next, host, but thanks for letting me pick your brain all the times that I brought you onto the podcast and thanks for filling in the gap, because Absolutely. We need the conversations to keep going. So thank you for that.
And thank you for your work and honestly, most of all, your example. I mean, you are a mentor to many, so thank you for being that to me and to this team as well.
Well, I'm still around. Y'all know how to reach me. For those of you listening, you can always reach me on the Circulating Life. You can reach me on LinkedIn or any other way. Justin, Garrett, you've got my contact information, so don't be shy. Don't be afraid to reach out. And now to sign this off, because we are done. Thank you all. And on behalf of Justin, Garrett, Chris, Lindsay, and myself, that's going to do it for this week's episode of First Case.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to First Case on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for First Case in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. We look forward to hearing from you.